In progress.
Right.
We're in progress.
We're in progress. Good morning, everybody. Well,
it is
maybe it's
Yeah.
not morning for
Maybe it's the middle of the night.
you.
That's when I would catch
I
up
do
on
my
stuff.
best learning in the middle of the night, late at night, but
Yeah.
we're glad to have you. We are finishing up the parenting maps, section 1. And we are on step 6, or I should say stage 1, step 6. And I've noticed
Discarding labels.
I've noticed on the YouTube replay that we look a little blurry. So I don't know if that's,
Sometimes I feel a little blurry.
I don't know if that's really us or if it's just the quality of my recording or what, but hopefully you guys don't mind it too much.
It makes
All right.
it makes our skin look more perfect if
Glistening.
we're blurred out.
Yes, listening. Okay, so we don't know how you guys are doing with this, if you've been following along up until this point, but it's definitely caused me a pause over time to just be more mindful about like what I'm doing as a parent
And why?
and why. Yeah, so this step 6 is talking about discarding labels. It starts on page 64.
Which I think it goes getting rid of labels and judgment and categorizing things. I mean, we are programmed to do that.
Mhm.
Our brain is programmed to do that from infancy on. Like women are mommies and men are daddies, and things with fur and 4 legs are dogs. It might be a cow, it might be a bear, but like I know it's a dog first, and then so we are comforted when we can categorize and lump
Yes.
things into.
Things are familiar.
Yes, yeah,
Mhm.
like and then as we get more information, then our categories become more fine-tuned, and so we're used to doing that, and this really kind of helped me to see where that categorization and judgment, those kind of things, labeling, where it goes from being helpful to understanding the world to maybe toxic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's such, in fact, I just had a mom email last night about, well, what do I do, or a care provider, what do I do when my kid says, why can't I be like the normal kids? And I mean, like, heartbreaking question, right? Like if your child has ever asked that, like, why can't I just be normal like everyone else? I mean, it just rips your heart
Yeah.
apart. But ironically, I took a picture of this book, The Myth of Normal.
Yeah.
And I sent that to her and I said, you know what? I said, show them a picture of this book. This is for adults too, right? Where we think even as adults, we have to fit into that category. We have to fit into a certain label to be normal or to be accepted or to be approved. And so this chapter, this step 6, discarding labels, is it really is kind of made me recognize like some things I would have changed if I would have known this when my kids were younger. And when I do give them, even an unconscious label, what implied message am I sending to them?
Yeah.
So
Let's get into it.
All right.
I highlighted the bottom of the poem, that my desire to put them into a box comes not from them, but from my own resistance to their undefinable nature and my fear of confronting my own. And I am like a big planner. I think you are too.
Mhm.
Like we can take a goal, a long-term goal, and break it down into bite-sized pieces. And this is what you need to be doing today to be at this place in a year from now, or whatever. And I think in my parenting that I have done, we talked about having this movie script for our kids. This is how we want them to end up, to be happy and successful. And so this is what we need to be doing now. And that gives me comfort because I've somehow defined the future. I have an estimate of how things are going to go.
Mhm.
And because there's kind of a free fall feeling for somebody who's a planner and who wants to know how things are going to come up at the end. And that undefinable nature, the undefinable future, can be scary for us, but it can be scary for them too, especially if we say,
Right.
we start asking kids at like 12, 13, 14, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do? Like,
Mhm.
how would they know?
Right. And I think that, then that's the other pressure we put on them. And going back to, like the last chapter when we talked about, are we really helping our kids enjoy their experiences and using those experiences to be present and learn about themselves? And then I think that natural process of finding themselves and being confident and
Mhm.
proud of who they are will come naturally. But
Mhm.
it really is. I mean, um, it's pretty hard, and to think that in the moment with parenting, and then kind of in the middle of 65 it says we think of the label in the moment and simply act as if this is who they are.
Mhm.
Like my kid's lazy, who's got an eighth grader or seventh or eighth grader out there that is pretty lazy, right? And
Yeah.
they I mean, like, and it's a natural stage of development as they are finding different ways to self-motivate. But at the same time, I mean, I'm guilty back then of
Mhm.
saying, oh my gosh, you're so lazy, just get up and do something, right? Or get off your phone, or and those labels just come to us so naturally.
Yeah.
But what is the adverse effect is that now we're providing a self-fulfilling prophecy for our kids to now believe that, well, I can't do that, I'm lazy, and
Mhm.
that's a challenge.
And even without, like, lazy is a pretty negative label that we might assign, but like one of my kids really demonstrated a lot of artistic ability
Mhm.
very young.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, they're artistic. Like
Mhm.
they're going to be a great artist.
Yeah, it's
And
so creative.
yes.
Yeah.
And so like all of the gifts that we were giving and the like enrichment stuff we were looking for was like art
Feed it.
stuff.
Mhm.
And it was really overwhelming. And on the flip side of that, I feel like my other kids might have felt like, well, I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of
So
course.
I'm not as artistic as my sibling. So, that's their gift.
Mhm.
And actually my, this artistic child that I have, I mean, is still very artistic and creative, but like didn't want to deep dive in it.
Mhm.
And like,
Mhm.
Mom, I don't need any more art supplies.
Yeah, and then maybe it's a hobby or something they do like for a
Yeah.
reason for them versus wanting to just jump on it.
Yeah.
I think that powerful questions to consider. What gives us the right to judge or label our children? Do we walk in their shoes or live in their circumstances? And I think that's really a reflection question. Like, am I really, and we've talked a lot about, and we do in coaching, about really being present and listening to our kids. Like, what are they really saying? Trying to read between the lines. And instead of just, in the hurried rush of day-to-day things, like, and kind of blowing them off, not because we're trying to blow them off intentionally, but it's just the nature of our lives. Are we really paying attention to who they are and what they're saying, and giving that a chance to really come to life? I used to do I still do, I guess, some training on cultural competency, and we talk about that unconscious bias. And a lot of times people think, we're biased against race, which is always the big one that comes up. But really, when we think, and you were talking about this earlier about, we categorize or group people naturally by sameness because it gives us safety, right? And that's exactly what I think this chapter digs into, is that when we can put a label or a name on something that we know and that we identify, then it makes us feel safe. Like, oh, like this is the box that I know my child fits into, and I feel good about that. And now, and it's not something that we do intentionally, but it's truly unconscious bias. And we associate things that we know and that we are familiar with, and it gives us peace, and it gives us a sense of
we definitely do it subconsciously. I mean, we don't do any of this. At the bottom of 65 it says no human can know another human. So much. And as parents, as you see your kids grow up and stuff, and you put them into a scenario, you might be able to pretty well predict like what they would do in any given scenario. Like when faced with this challenge, or
I hope my kid does this.
Or my kid is not going to play outside in the snow for 3 hours because they don't love it that much, but this kid will. That kind of stuff. But ultimately, the kid is and our spouses and partners and
Mhm.
whatever are free agents, and they can go rogue at any minute, like
Mhm.
based on
Right.
what we understand, because they're agents unto themselves.
Right.
But the thing that really can handicap our kid is when we unconsciously, at the bottom 65, when
Mhm.
we label them like my artistic kid, we unconsciously train them to see the world from only one vantage point.
Mhm.
And oh my gosh, that gets us into so much trouble
Mhm.
if you can only look at the world from one perspective.
Right.
I mean, I think we've seen how that can blow up a society.
Exactly. On the bottom of page 66 or near the end, I kind of circled the whole paragraph and I just put, wow, like this is an opportunity to grow. So if we probe deeply into labels and are willing to own our ego attachment to our identity as parents, we may be able to see that these good kids are not actually so good in terms of our own transformation, as they keep our ego stronghold in place. And the kids we call bad, now, while they may shatter our parental ego and cause chaos at
Mhm.
home, again, bad is in quotation marks, these kids hold the potential to really awaken their parents. And I tell you what, I was talking to somebody else about this the other day, is that the child who challenges you the most is probably the one who's making you grow the most.
Mhm.
Because if everything was status quo and good, how realistic is that in your home compared to real life? That's not going to teach you or your child how to adjust to adversity. And I thought, oh my gosh, as much as I
Want peace.
I know, as much as you want peace, as much as you want harmony, as much as you just want, can we just all get along? Right?
Yeah.
In those moments, though, I often will see that myself, is that that's when I have grown the most as a parent, is when a child would challenge me.
Yeah.
And that then kind of puts me in my place and kind of like, check yourself, mom.
Yeah.
Like, and I hate it when your child says that to you,
Yes.
because it's this ego that really stood out to me.
Yeah. Well, and that those moments, and I am grateful for I'm not necessarily grateful in the moment of the upheaval, but I mean, I find myself dropping to my knees, reading in the books, like trying to get into nature and saying, what can I do better? And ultimately it always comes back to, because I have kids that have definitely challenged my paradigm of life, and it's helped me to understand that I really only have control over me. And then I've had to reevaluate what's more important to me, my kids fulfilling the ideas that I have for them, or me still having a relationship with my kid, whatever they decide to do with their life. And in that, and I think always in parenting, when we make decisions, we feel like we're choosing our kid, but to separate those things, do I want to have a relationship with what I've decided my kid is, or do I want to get to know them as their individual self, and do that walk alongside
and be okay with who they are as their individual self? Like, I don't know, I can't remember if I said it earlier on a video, but like when our kids can identify what they need and advocate for themselves, and we have to listen, even if it's not
painful.
what we want.
Yeah.
Or it's not that we don't want it, it's that it's not what we had planned for our child, right? And so if we jump ahead and try to put our kids in certain boxes about what we want for them, then I just think we're really limiting them on how to really find that inner peace and pride and confidence that they will have in who they are. Like this caregiver who said, how do I answer this question for my child who says, why can't I be normal like other kids? And what is that answer? That answer is that we try to build that intrinsic sense of, you are so much more than normal, right?
Yeah.
You are more than normal. You are kind, compassionate, loving.
Right.
I mean, You are all these things. And that is your normal, right?
Mhm.
And then, you know, the other flip side to that is, what is normal?
There isn't.
Like, exactly. So how do you tell your child, you know what, well, what's a normal dog look like?
Mhm.
What's a normal piece of fruit look like?
Mhm.
What does a normal, like, you know, what does a normal school look like? There is nothing is normal, you know, like maybe
No.
they might have typical things,
Yeah.
but really and then what is it? What is a normal child? What do you mean? What is a normal child to you?
Yeah.
You know, and then helping understand like, oh, well, that maybe there isn't really an answer to that. And so then you're kind of, huh.
In my house, in the kitchen, I've got hanging on the wall, weird is a side effect of awesome. And, you know, and
Write that down. Weird is a side effect of awesome. That could be a poster in your kitchen.
because, you know, when the kids were little, they would, again, in that idea to categorize, and I have a child with an eating disorder, and they would be like, ooh, what are you eating?
Mm,
You know, and in that is a judgment,
Mhm.
right? And so they'd be like, well, I don't want to do that, or I would never do that, or I like this, or all of that kind of stuff. And our mantra has been like, everybody's weird. Like
Yeah.
everybody's weird in their own special way.
yeah,
And because there's no two people on the planet that are
right,
alike.
right,
And so we got to figure out how to negotiate that and honor everybody in their weirdness.
right.
I think
In
normal is
their-
a stupid word.
Their weirdness. We worked with each other long enough to know that we definitely have weird things about us.
Yes, we do. And it makes life exciting.
Yes, and I think that there's, you know, on the bottom of 67, I just saw, you know, there's something else at play that's far more important than my ego, right? It's the child's ability to embrace themselves as who they are. And that is, I mean, and I know, I mean, none of us, if we really sat down and talked about it, none of us are intentionally putting ourselves before our kids. I mean,
Mm.
when was the last time, moms especially, when was the last time you bought yourself a new pair of shoes?
This weekend.
Oh, well, not you then. I'm talking about like, it's back to school, right? So the kids need shoes, the kids need clothes, that like we often put ourselves on the back burner.
For
And we
sure.
often are always focused on meeting the kids' needs. But
Sure.
this chapter really kind of was like, okay, let's just take a peek, right? Let's just kind of look at this a little bit.
I wasn't sure if I was gonna talk about this, but this idea of labels and putting people in a box. My second oldest child was assigned female at birth, and they were the most delicate, beautiful little blue-eyed, blonde-haired. It appeared very feminine. This is also my artistic child. We gave them a name, and everything kind of tracked for my thoughts for them. And it was a little bit, maybe halfway through elementary school, that I started noticing this like incongruence, this conflict. This child is certainly perfectionistic and had unrealistic expectations for themselves, which I probably contributed to in some way, unbeknown to myself, because I tried really hard not to do that. But I mean, it wasn't until high school that they came to themselves, and then really into college when they came out as a member of the LGBTQ community and questioning and really trying to say, you know, this is what I've been living, but it doesn't seem to match how I've been feeling. And that can be earth shattering for families, because that's a complete shift to the movie script that we've set. And in the process of that, they wanted to say goodbye to that kind of past self that didn't feel authentic, and chose a new name. And again, there's another big shift. And I saw a meme that where there was a parent and a kind of adolescent looking age cartoon, and the parent was saying, I gave you a name until you could find your own voice, and now you can take your own name.
Mm.
And I think, and that to me kind of sums up this kind of idea. Like, we do our best in trying to kind of guide our kids along. And, you know, my artistic kid, who I thought was going to be an artist or an architect or something creative like that. And it turned out that the criticism necessary to develop those skills was too much, and it took away their joy from that. And so there was a shift. And so, you know, not just in like categories of what kind of, and not everybody who watches this is going to agree with how we handled it in our family, but there's a peace and a unification of within this kid now that's able to look at the world in a whole new way. They've stepped outside of a box they've stepped outside of the box, and our conversations have been, get rid of the box. Nobody needs a box anymore. Let's just pave the way together. And it's been a really good exercise in the walk beside.
I'm gonna, your story reminds me of a video. I'm gonna post it in the links in the comments of this one, because it really does give an example of exactly how we see, like, we either consciously or not, or society addresses us as labels into groups, right? But until we start really building relationships, and you said this earlier, the key is that you maintain a relationship with your child. And we've said that 100 times, if not 10 times in our coaching, right? Relationship first, and then everything else will come. Connection, and then correction. So this video also then shows, like, until we start building relationships with people and talking to them and getting to know them on a deeper level, we don't realize how many labels we share.
Oh yeah.
Like, we're
For
alike
sure.
in so many other ways. So I'm going to add that video as just a little extra kind of example as to what we're seeing here.
In the middle of page 68, it just kind of reaffirmed, I underlined, they are human. Our kids are human. Like we talked about last time, they're not like mini us, but they're on the same path as us, right? Developmentally, they're in different places, but I also underlined life enhancing. When we give them choices and they feel liberated and not in a box, it can be life enhancing. And if we continue to push them back into the box, this is what's best for you, I know what's best for you, it can be life destroying.
And I have always said that my middle child is like a butterfly caught in a net. Like, I just feel like, man, we gotta break out of that net. Whatever is you're encaged in, right? We need to find that, and we need to destroy it. And that's that too. It says, do the choices we're giving our children allow our child to feel liberated or encaged? And I was just like, wow. In the middle, about the middle of 69, there are some good strategies that they offer. Like, given that younger kids sometimes make quick decisions, like about quitting things, or, you know, like, we want to nurture the gifts that they show at an early age, right? We want them to explore their interests, and just like you did with your creative child, right? So it does say, though, here's a good strategy. I'm aware that you want to stop playing the piano. I want you to do what you feel is best for you, but let's decide after another time frame, right? Like, let's give it 3 more times, or let's try another 3 months, or whatever it is, because we've already committed to the teacher. And this is where we get stuck on, well, my kid committed, I'm going to force them to do it all the way, right? And then after that time, if you still feel the same way, we can talk about it, right? So it's not getting into that impulsive, like, you know, child controlling. I don't want to do this. And we also, I believe every parent wants to teach their child commitment. Your word, your word is what you stand on. So this is an example of coming alongside your child instead of leading with your ego and saying, I paid for this. Okay, I might have said that once. I paid for this. You're going to continue it, right? I don't care if you don't like it. But it leads to your child feeling seen and heard and honored. And that is a gift you can give them that will last their whole life.
I see that so many times Well, my husband and I decided before we even had kids that swimming lessons and piano lessons are life skills and our children will take them. Now, swimming lessons is actually,
for that. Yeah.
It's a life skill. We were both raised in musical families, and so piano lessons. Now, I started and stopped piano lessons probably 8 times as a kid.
Mhm.
And I never got to a great proficiency because of that. And so, I'm going to help my children to love piano. So all my kids, we started piano lessons and everything, and one really took to it and could have gone far. But eventually got to this place where, like, playing the piano is like a stress reliever to me. But when we have lessons and I'm again being criticized for it, like, it's not my stress relief.
Right.
And so it takes away that kind of Zen bliss thing. And I was like, oh, okay. Thank you for communicating that to me. We've also had, signed up for sports or whatever. I'm like, well, I don't like soccer. I'm like, well, we've committed to the season. Do you think you can make it to the end of the season? And maybe just cheering for your teammates and sometimes they can, fulfill that commitment,
right?
Whatever it is. But, this is where your kids, and if they're like, no, if it's going to be screaming and yelling and crying and anxiety every time you go, then maybe you negotiate for something else,
And be mindful that if they are persistent in saying, I don't like this, and they can't articulate why, you're like, well, why don't you look like you're having fun? I mean, there could be an underlying reason.
Yes.
There definitely could be, like, maybe some kid is being mean to them and you don't see it, or maybe they don't like the way the coach addresses things, or, talks to them in a mean way. I've had a kid, quit a team mid-season because, I mean, after every practice, it was like a crying meltdown about how they felt the coach was treating them. And, I mean, if that's the case, really, listen to your kid. And if you're seeing some adverse behavior before and after.
But there are a lot of parents, and I eventually got to the place where I wasn't that parent, but like this is non-negotiable. Like, you gotta learn this. This is what we do. And it reminds me of, like, the freshman that I met who's like, I'm going to an Ivy League school and I'm going to be a doctor. Well, why are you doing that? Because that's what we do in my family.
Right.
Yeah. Like, oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
So be mindful of that too. And certainly we want kids to know that we're hearing them, but I think this is a great, and on the top of page 70, it gives you some more examples. How to decrease tantrums and power struggles by just really walking alongside of your child. If it makes you feel good and you're ready for the consequences, then the decision is yours. Now, granted, developmentally,
right,
you might not be able to offer this to a 6-year-old, but certainly to a 10-year-old, 14-year-old, right?
And if they're quitting a sport, maybe they need to explain to the coach.
Absolutely.
Like, I will go with you, but you need to tell the coach,
Yeah.
like, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
Help them to have that kind of experience.
And in situations like that where we've had to do that, we've actually written down a script,
practice.
or we're gonna, write it out, and then we're gonna call the coach and we're gonna read, hey coach, I have a letter I want to read to you, right? I mean, we give them the opportunities to do it. Like, we can do it in person, we can do it on the phone, we can, try not to do it via text message or email, because you want your kid to learn how to face
and advocate for themselves.
Advocate.
It's okay to not want to do something.
Absolutely. Okay.
I just in the first big paragraph on page 70, our goal is for children to feel seen and honored for their feelings, and trust that parents will consider these with respect and gravity, and that allows them to feel, and for us to feel with them, connected and empowered. And if we're talking about, I want my kids to be happy and successful, that's what that is.
And I love this part about let their choice be about their relationship to themselves.
Yeah.
Like kind of gets me choked up, because we talk extensively in parent coaching services about building not only our child's self-esteem, but there are a lot of parents out there who need self-esteem support too, right? Like, we are in a thankless role as parents and caregivers. And so as our kids continue to pick and pick and pick, and we deal and we deal and we deal, man, it doesn't surprise us that one of the first things that we work on with a lot of clients is our own adult self-esteem and self-confidence.
Mhm.
So think about your relationship with yourself and how can we nurture our child's relationship with themselves and their self-esteem and their self-confidence. So that's important to me because I think they're, especially now with our preteens into teens, we have a lot of influences out there that cut down a child's relationship with themselves and who they're supposed to be and what they're supposed to be doing, and that label, right? Like who are they trying to please? And
Yeah.
is it everything out here? Or is it, are you really trying to look at pleasing yourself?
And you want to have that, because I've seen kids at the high school level, you know, where a kid decides like, I'm going to buckle down and I'm going to pay attention, and their friends are like, your nose was in the book. I walked past and we're trying to get you to come out of class and you look like you were studying, you know, and they're saying that in a negative way. The other thing that this book brings up is how we're interacting with our children, but it's going to bring up stuff because a lot of parents that we work with have generational trauma, right? And you might be reading along and say, oh, that's why I feel so crappy about this or that, because that's the way that I was treated, or that's the way that I was labeled. And I never wanted to be that. And if I tried to be something different than that, then I was judged. And so, because I feel like some of these things are coming up, you know, slapping me in the face. Like, I wish I would have done that different with my kids, but, and I was raised in a pretty healthy household, but still there's like, oh, right, man, now I know why I was so stressed about that, because there was an unreasonable amount of importance put on this particular issue or something like that. So be gentle with yourself as you're identifying mistakes that you've made or wounds that you may have carried all along, because that really informs our parenting.
And just, I must be on a resource kick today because there's a really great psychologist on social media, and I don't know if any of you guys know of her work or follow her yet, but her name is Dr. Nicole LaPera. She's her hashtag or her X tweet.
No.
She's the holistic psych. So I'm going to link to her too. If you are a parent who feels like, you know, you're trying to break through some of the things and the ways that you were parented and what that's left behind for you, and trying to find ways to heal or overcome or break that cycle, then this might be a resource for you too. Because it really does help look back into healing ourselves. She does she's got a lot of great research and some good books out there on self-healing, and really some validating points about where we are as adults and how we can, you know, stop blaming ourselves for all these things. So if you've been reading this book with us and following along and you keep thinking, oh my gosh, I'm awful. Oh my God, I've done everything wrong. Oh, this book is, that is not what this is about. It's about building awareness. And if you do have some of those feelings, like, are you willing to start exploring where they're coming from? Like, why are we being so hard on ourselves? And why are we giving ourselves so much added grief based on how we're parenting today? So if that sounds like you and you want to dig into this, some of this other research, or follow this person on social media, Dr. Nicole LaPera, I'll link her in the.
Would you also put down Kristen Neff for self-compassion?
Yeah,
because that's really important. And actually, this on page 71, I highlighted a bunch of stuff because it kind of speaks to that. And so the quote that I'm going to read is about our children, but I want you to put it and think about yourself as well. So our children, or us, we deserve the space to grow and evolve without the burden of our labels. We need to be given the freedom to make mistakes with confidence that we see them as infinitely and immeasurably worthy at all times. So many kids, and I think we do too, feel like our acceptance and the love that we receive from our relationships is conditional. And if I make a mistake, and I think that's why a lot of parents don't want to apologize or don't want to admit that they've made a mistake, because then I'm not as good. And really I highlighted our connection to their essence, to our children, to our partners, to our connection never falters. Like, and we focus on that so much in coaching, that a behavior is something that someone does. It's not who they are.
Exactly.
And,
Yeah.
and a lot of times when we're labeling good, bad, we're labeling who they are based on what they do. Like good boy, good girl, bad boy. Like that's you're being naughty.
Yeah.
And in the last paragraph, it says it giving them this space allows them to remember that their sense of worth stays constant despite the vagaries of life on the surface. And maybe a good visual aid is, and I've seen this, like if you have a $20 bill, you can get a clean $20 bill from, that's beautiful. Who wants the $20 bill? Everybody wants the $20 bill. If you crinkled up the $20 bill, if you drove over it with the car, if you put mud on it, the
Still a
value
$20
is not changed, and life does that to us. It crinkles us up, it runs us over with the car tire, we get dirty and we make mistakes, but our value stays constant. And that's really important to communicate to our kids, to our partners and our families, because then when mistakes are made, there's not the same shame. It's like,
Right.
it's no different than getting a scratch on your arm. Like, look, I got this scratch, and what do we need to do about it? Well, we need to clean it. We need to put a Band-Aid on it, and then we're going to move on. And we're maybe not going to walk next to that fence that scratched you.
Right.
Like, we're going to learn something from it.
Right. This is a really powerful chapter in a lot of ways. So if you're curious about, putting it into practice, one of the best practices for this step is to go through a label and judgment detox for a week.
And when you talk about the
label and judgment detox, people, this
like
is serious.
And it kind of goes on to talk about, like, you're not going to like crucify yourself when you're like, oh, I just caught myself in a judgment. The exercise of this is to make yourself aware.
Yes.
Like when someone cuts you off in traffic, what immediately you're making a judgment immediately, right?
Yes.
And so one of the ways that I use to challenge that, because somebody cuts you off in traffic and you're like, oh, what a jerk, and they don't see anybody else, they don't care about anybody else, you're making a character judgment based on the way they drive. And I try to say, is there a different story I could tell myself? Because first of all, I have no idea what's going on in that person's life. Maybe they're like that all the time. Maybe they're not. Maybe they have a loved one who's in critical. Maybe they were just yelled at. Maybe they were just fired. Maybe, so challenging, noting, oh, there was a judgment. There was a label. There was a, and not beating yourself up, but being kind of curious about it. I like the curiosity aspect.
Yes, right, come at it from curiosity instead of from judgment. And I do the same thing. And Dr. Shraki Holly has done some great work on, it might be your first thought, but don't let it be your last thought.
Yes.
And that's one of my favorite quotes. And in his work, he has done a lot of like culturally responsive work. And he always says it. So that's stuck in my head. And I always think, okay, nope, that there's something else going on. What else could be going on for that person? And why am I doing that? Like, I'm notorious for when people went on the road. I don't know why. I'm just like a different person. Now, granted, when I'm in the car by myself, right? I feel like I'm a different person in the car by myself. And then I say something that just flies out. I'm like, why did I say that? Like, that is not who I am. But for some reason, just in the moment, it shocks you. So awareness is always the first step in transformation. And again, this has been some pretty eye-opening work so far. If you've been following through with this and trying some of these things, it's been some eye-opening stuff. So again, like Lori mentioned, just trying to be aware and try to hold off on judging yourself for what you find and learn about yourself if you do this detox.
If you start this and you are finding yourself keeping score about how horrible you are at judging, you're not ready to do it.
No,
don't do it. Stop. If you can go at it from a curiosity point and just like, oh, I didn't realize how much those, and I mean, we make positive judgments too. Like we see somebody who looks like they've got who looks normal and who
Yeah.
looks like they've got their act together. And really, if you crack that nut open, everybody's dealing with problems.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, but they
Oh,
are.
yeah.
They might be able to look prettier while they're doing it, but that doesn't mean anything. So don't let this be a way to beat yourself up. Just being aware of it and letting it go. And I like at the top of 73, it says, as you keep your inner eye on your judgments, you'll begin to let go of them faster. So if that is not what's happening, then you're ruminating on the perceived mistakes you think you're making. And if you're not ready to let go of that, then focus on something else.
And you'll never get to zero judgment.
Oh, no.
You'll never get
We
there. So
started from like
if you
2 years old, like here's all the
Yeah.
bears. Here's the red box, here's the blue box, here's the yellow box, here's the green box. Do it right. Right? That we're designed to do it.
Right. So keep that in mind too. Don't have these perfectionistic ideals about like, you know what, I'm gonna be a total accepting and aware. And I mean, it's human nature, as we've talked about. The big thing about just owning our judgments, and this is towards the middle bottom of 73, is we begin to detach from our projections onto our children, letting them sort through their own mess ups and mistakes without the added burden of trying to please us. And I don't know about you guys, but if you've ever had your kids say, I can't do anything right, or like sometimes, my kids would even come and say, why is dad never happy with me? Why is dad, and I'm sure they've gone to him and said, mom's always mad at me because I can't do anything right. I mean, I'm sure my kids did that as well, but like that.
I was thinking about you during the coaching story.
Oh, right.
I'm
About the dad coaching their
that would
kid.
be horrible to coach your own kid.
Oh my gosh, but see, we loved it. But see, there's some kids that we
Yes,
could coach.
yes.
There's my husband and I both coached our children through many years of sports, right? Like dozens. And we could do it often with one child. I think one child got I think my husband coached my son in football and baseball for years. I coached him in basketball. So he had his parent coach basically from the time he could play sports until he was in high school. And then my husband and I both tried coaching my daughter's basketball teams. And that worked okay, but it only was for a couple years, a year here, maybe a year there, when they couldn't find anyone else.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like the relationship is different. So.
And how do you not bring the coach home?
Yeah,
to be mom
exactly.
and dad?
And how do you, I mean, but again, you guys know your children best. So there are kids like you could sit at the table and go through the playbook and you could watch film and you could learn and critique and challenge, right? But then there are kids that you can't do that with because that's not their mindset and that's not what they're wanting from you. They don't want the critique. They can't have that kind of, criticism and constructive feedback. So
yeah, one of my kids would be like, Mom, I need you to just be a mom right now and not a therapist. And then I'm like, tell me more about that.
Yeah. What I really hear you saying is, all right.
Okay.
So this one, all right. So we are coming to a close on stage 1. And we want you guys to know these next stages, okay? Stage 2 takes you into your own childhood and how it has deeply influenced your parenting. So, and I'm reading it right from the book, and we've read ahead, so we know this. While this can be a challenging stage, it's also the heart of this book, because once you see how you came to be who you are, you will be liberated to make new choices and change your relationship with your children in a profoundly transformational way. Now, if that is not hopeful, right? Profoundly transformational. If that is not hopeful, then I don't think anything else is. Because here's the thing, and some of you that we know already, are really looking for profound transformation in your relationships with your children. And we are here doing this to nurture that and to guide it and to help get you through some of those tough times. So we're going to give you a word of caution, and we're going to have this episode be a little bit shortened just because we want you to really be mindful of some of the work that we're going to be doing, jumping into these next chapters. And then those 3 resources that we have that we'll post in the chat in the bottom. the box and the labels video. And then Dr. Nicole LaPera, who works a lot about on healing adults from their childhood experiences. And then Kristen Neff on self-compassion. So some other things to maybe poke into in the meantime. And Lori and I will be back with stage 2. It starts, it's called From Dysfunctional Patterns to Conscious Choice. So
I'm gonna wear my big girl panties that day.
we'll be ready to dig in
Yeah.
deep. I'm gonna wear my gardening boots. So be in the mud. All right. Thanks so much, you guys.
Bye.
Let us know your comments.